People didn't get a chance to hear those comments. We're going to play those right now real quick.
What's your reaction when Urban Meyer retired, Jim? Obviously a big-time rival, big-time achiever there at Ohio State.
Yeah, Urban Meyer's had a winning record, really phenomenal record everywhere he's been, but also controversy follows everywhere he's been.
All right, so we just got your take on those comments. How much pressure is on Harbaugh this season?
Well, that's the other side of this. I think there is a lot of pressure because now that Urban Meyer has moved away, and Urban Meyer, even though he's a TV guy now, was the second best coach in the country during Harbaugh's 4 years at Michigan. Harbaugh came in as one of the top 4 or 5 coaches as well. And if he can't beat Ryan Day, a rookie coach in Ann Arbor, you have to wonder when that time is going to come. Now, what's really interesting is I run into Michigan fans all over the country, and they're not as concerned because they have been in the wilderness for so long. This is a program that thinks it's Alabama, that thinks it's Notre Dame, that thinks it's Ohio State, but has 1.5 national championships in the last 70 years. So they like Harbaugh, but if he got blown out again by Ohio State and couldn't break double digits, then I don't know where they go.
Yeah, it does sound a little bit like Harbaugh is kind of downing Urban Meyer. It sounds a little excuse-making, but he's telling the truth, right? Look, Paul, I want to get to what's going on between some of these Clemson and Alabama players. They're jawing at each other. What's your take?
Well, Alabama has spent 6 months talking about turning the page, Max, and in one sentence by Dylan Moses Wednesday at the SEC Media Days, and a couple of more sentences by Nick Saban, they blew it all up. Dylan Moses, the defensive player, talked about how he thought Georgia was maybe a little bit better than Clemson, and that mushroomed over to Charlotte, where the ACC was holding court, and a Clemson player, an offensive lineman, just cracked right back and said Notre Dame was better than Alabama. Now, the funny part about that is Notre Dame and Alabama are two of the biggest names in the history of college football. Notre Dame lost to Clemson by 27, Alabama by 28. You figure that one out.
Woo. Paul, how high are you still on Tua? Is this the best pro prospect coming into the NFL next season? Or what does he have to prove? What are you looking for this season?
I mean, I'm very high on him. In seeing him this week, he looks like he has moved on. He had a lot of injuries at the end of last season. In fact, he had to be replaced in the SEC championship game by Jalen Hurts, and because he was injury prone. But I think they have that worked out. Steve Sarkisian, you may have heard that name a few times on this show, is now the offensive coordinator at Alabama, and I think that is going to help. Last year, I think he got a little bit confused, especially against the elite defenses. So the question is, we know he can beat up on Duke. That's the Duke football team, no Zion, in the opener of the college football season. But what's he going to do against Texas A&M, against LSU, ultimately against Georgia, and in the likely rematch that everyone's predicting against Clemson?
Paul, I want to circle back to something you said because you mentioned the two most storied franchises or programs in the history of college football, Notre Dame and Alabama, and you put a 27 spot and a 28 spot on them. Has Clemson replaced Alabama as the premier program in college football?
Well, Max, they are today, and that's all we can really talk about because they have won 2 of the last 3 national championships, and in spite of all the controversy this week, you can't scrape that away. And I was talking to Nick Saban on Wednesday, and you know, he talked about all these distractions that he had on his staff going into that game, and I think that trickled down to the players. And he had a couple of coaches leaving, but Max, he has coaches leaving every single year, and some interpreted that as an excuse. It was just Saban being Saban, but think about this possibility, and I realize we're 6 months away, but what if Alabama meets Clemson again and loses again? That would be 3 out of 4 for Dabo Swinney, and then your question to me a minute ago would be a moot point. Clemson would own college football at that point.
Paul, there's a big problem still in the college football tournament. A lot of winners from the Power 5 conferences don't even have a chance to compete for the national championship. We know in March Madness, NCAA tournament, it's a one or done, go home. It's a great experience. Is there anything that needs to be changed, or do you keep the system as is?
I wouldn't keep it as is, no, because last year, on the biggest day of the year in college football, remember that Saturday before New Year's, we had the 2 semifinals? Yep. The games were unwatchable. You had the Clemson 27-point win over Notre Dame, and at one point, Alabama was ahead by 4 touchdowns over Kyler Murray in Oklahoma. They did come back a little bit in the second half, but that's not what you want. So you ask the question, well, how do you come away with a different system? Well, there's only one solution. You have to expand it. That doesn't guarantee that you get a better situation, but it is more inclusive. You let some conference champions in. I mean, the Big Ten has been shut out for a couple of years, something that Jim Delaney is hopping mad about as he spoke yesterday in Chicago. And it's not a perfect solution, but it helps. And one other thing to remember, in the 5 college football playoffs, the number 1 seed has never won, so you can't say it's not fair. The NFL has done pretty well opening the doors, and so has every other sport except college football.
Paul, I want to circle back to Clemson and Alabama again because that's where my head is going into every college football season now for some of the reasons we discussed. Tua had so much fanfare, and there was just something about this guy. He had the stuff you can tell of a winner, but also had the skills. And then Trevor Lawrence. It's not just that he won like Deshaun Watson. It's the way he did it so much better than everyone else on the field. Who is the better prospect at quarterback, Trevor Lawrence or Tua?
I think it's a fairly easy answer, Max. It's Trevor Lawrence. He's a little bit bigger. He has command, and he was just unbelievable. And what really struck me, I'd seen him before on television last year, but when you stand on the field, as we all did of the national championship game, and watch him, he peers over everyone. He was in total control. Remember last year, Kelly Bryant was the starter coming off of a playoff berth the year before. He lost his job 4 games into the season, and Trevor never looked back. I mean, I think he's one of the best prospects I have seen in a long time, and I don't want to start that drum because he still has another year after this, but I think he is a better, I wouldn't say significantly better, but right now he's a better prospect than Tua. He could be significantly better a year from now.
Paul, thank you so much for your insight. I know we're
Appreciate it,
going to be seeing and hearing a lot from you as the college football season approaches. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
See
Paul.
you soon.
All righty. The first El Tráfico Derby of the season is tonight between the Galaxy and LAFC at 10 Eastern on ESPN, ESPN Deportes, and the ESPN app. LAFC comes into this one to the best start in MLS history through 20 games. Be sure to watch that one. And we have more first take debate to come. Did Peyton Manning take an unfair shot at Tony Romo? We'll show you the comments and the debate that is coming up next.